Hello everybody, welcome back to Kanga TV, home of North Melbourne fans, and can you believe we are only 7 days away from our first game of the year. Nothing hits quite like the start of a new footy season. We are taking on the Bulldogs next Saturday night at Marvel Stadium. I, for one, cannot wait. I will be there with bells on. I'm ready. I'm so ready. I feel like my life finally has purpose once again. Before we get too ahead of ourselves, we have a team that we need to select. Now, for those of you who remember, at the start of this year, I put out a video predicting my best 23 for North Melbourne in season 2025. Since then, there's been, sadly, a few injuries to some key personnel. There's also been a few structure and positional changes, and I think the side heading into round one will look slightly different to what I had predicted at the start of the year. So here, today, we're going to discuss all of it. I will leave that video in the description down below if you do want to watch it, but I will also have both my best 23 and my round one team side by side so you can see line by line where the changes have been made. I'm sure there'll be some people and some positions that will be up for debate. I can't wait to hear all of your thoughts. Let me know what you think of my team and what you guys would do down in the description below as well. Let's not waste any more time. Let's just get straight to the video. So as I mentioned, we will go line by line. I've got a little key over here. So I've got the ins, the outs, and the positional changes. A lot of these are just positional changes. There's some personnel I think might be better suited in different places based on the form that they've shown over the preseason, or maybe just the way our side might look differently as a whole and they're better suited to start somewhere else. But then there's a few ins and a few outs, obviously based on form and injury. Now that you know what's going on, let's get straight to the side. Starting with the last line of defense, and my best 23 featured Logue, Corr, and McDonald, but into round one, I would go with Corr, Logue, and Archer. It's just a little bit of a structure change, a little positional change. I've moved Archer into the back pocket because I've replaced him on the centre half back line with somebody else, which we'll get to in a second. McDonald, the one to make way for him. After I made this side, he actually announced that he was stepping down as co-captain of North Melbourne. I'm a big believer that captains should be starting on the field with the opening bounce. They need to be the ones to lead a team from the front. And Luke McDonald, while I think he's been an incredible servant for our club, I just don't think that's necessary now anymore, considering he is no longer part of that core leadership team. He is still a leader. I still think he's a contributor. I still think he had a really good couple of games in the preseason, but I just don't see the need for him to start on field like I might have had him there if he was still co-captain. So that is the main reason for that positional change. Moving along to the next line in defense, my original team had Archer, Comben, and Daniel. My new look line for round one is Debutant, Finn O'Sullivan, Comben, and Daniel. That was the reason for the positional change. I think one thing I identified in that game against Melbourne and then also against West Coast is that Daniel cannot be the only rebounding defender that we have in this side. He definitely needs a little bit of help because the ball is entering our forward 50 at lightning pace, and we do need a little bit more run and carry out of defense to help move the ball up the ground. I initially thought maybe Sheezel or McKercher could be the people to fill that spot. I thought maybe Riley Hardiman would get a run in that game against West Coast, but he actually didn't come onto the ground at all. But then it was Finn O'Sullivan in that second half against West Coast. He just looked so comfortable and he looked so dangerous off that half back. And I wasn't sure if he would follow in the footsteps of Sheezel and McKercher, who both started in their first years in defense, but it looks like Finn O'Sullivan fit right in. Not only did he fit right in, but he had such an incredible impact. So I think it was enough. I would start him on the ground. I would start him off the halfback, see what he can do, see how much he can link up with Daniel. I think it could be an excellent move, and I would be all in favour of Finn O'Sullivan not only debuting, but starting straight away on the field. Moving into the middle of the ground, and I had Bailey Scott on one wing, Colby McKercher on the other, and Harry Sheezel in the middle for my starting side in round one. I have the wings the same, but I've put Tom Powell right in the centre. He just looks like a completely different player again this year. He just looks like he's taken another step up. He's ferocious, he's so strong, but he's also really clean, and he's hardly put a foot wrong. I think he's going to be a massive part of our midfield this year, and I think his improvement will be a bit of a barometer and set a standard for the rest of the side. I think he's so strong. He's a really great two-way runner as well, and you just want him to get his hands on the footy in the middle of the ground. So wings are the same. Sheezel is still in my team, don't worry about that, but I've just moved Tom Powell into the centre. Forward line now, and as you'll see, I have replaced Simpkin with Harry Sheezel on that forward flank. The other two, Parker and Darling, stay the same. Look, I think there's going to be a lot of rotation between the mids and the forwards. Parker, Sheezel, Simpkin, all of these guys are going to be rotating through the forward line and through the middle of the ground. Equally, I think we'll see Paul Curtis and Cam Zurhaar pop up in the middle of the ground from time to time for a little bit of chaos as well when required. But Harry Sheezel, we all know he's such an elite user of the footy, and we want the ball in his hands as much as we can. He is a really nice shot on goal. He also is really level-headed. He's got a good temperament about him, and he's not somebody that is daunted by the prospect of needing to take a shot on goal every once in a while. So I've moved him into the forward line. I think he would be a great asset and addition to have in that forward mix. Keeping him in that forward flank position allows him also to push up into the midfield when needed. It also equally allows him to be a link in the chain and hopefully execute into our forward 50 a lot better to the advantage of our forwards, the likes of Darling and Larkey and Zurhaar and Curtis. So that is the reason why I've moved him there. I have moved Simpkin somewhere else on the ground. The other two, like I said, stay the same. I think for these high forward mids, they're all going to be swapping anyway. I think there'll be a lot of rotation as the game goes on. Keep things interesting, keep them a bit unpredictable, and maybe keep the opposition guessing. But that is just how I've started my side for round one. I haven't made any further changes to the forward mix. This line stays the same: Zurhaar, Curtis and Larkey. I actually wouldn't be surprised if we saw Darling at full forward and Larkey at centre half forward, because he has been pushing up the ground a little bit higher, I have noticed, particularly in those two practice matches. He's been a really, really great link in the chain, and we're trying to transition the ball from one end of the ground to the other. But to keep things simple and keep things easy, I've just decided to keep them the same for this video. But that sort of mix, that core sort of 4, potentially 5 forwards will probably stay the same anyway, so I didn't feel the need to make any changes for positioning this time around. Obviously, Xerri takes main aim in the ruck. Alongside him is LDU, and I've swapped Simpkin and I've moved Powell into the middle of the ground, as you saw earlier. That performance in the Indigenous All-Stars game for Jai Simpkin was one of the best I've seen him play. He was motivated, he was emotive, he just looked like a man on a mission, and I think if he can continue that form into our side this season, he is going to have one hell of a year. Like I mentioned with the decision to move Luke McDonald off the ground, I wanted to put Jai Simpkin on the ball and just surround him in all of the action. Let him lead from the front. Let him be the one to direct traffic. Let him be the one to be a playmaker. It's so frustrating to keep repeating the performances against West Coast over in Perth last year and the Indigenous All-Stars game that he played last month. But those two performances just stand out in my mind. Maybe the game against Hawthorn in round 24 last year as well, while it was an absolutely abomination of a performance and it was just horrible all round. I don't think any of us can deny what an impact Simpkin had. For those of us who do want to remember anything from that day, that would probably be it. So I decided, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. We'll back him in. I hope that the sole captaincy, he really thrives on it, and judging by his performance, while it was just one performance in the Indigenous All-Stars game, it was definitely a great start for our sole captain in 2025, Jai Simpkin. So that has directed my decision to put him on ball alongside LDU, who is just a class above. I mean, what that man can do, the way he can dance out of traffic, he is such an important part to this side. I don't need to say it anymore. We all know how important his signature is and how highly anticipated it is. And I think both of those will be served very, very well by our ruckman, Xerri, who is in for another massive year, hopefully All-Australian for him this year. So that is where my last line sits. Okay, guys, here's where things start to get a bit interesting, I promise. My interchange bench looks completely different to how I thought it would look at the start of the year. So my best 23, my interchange bench looked something like this. I had George Wardlaw, Bryn Teakle, Riley Hardiman, and Finn O'Sullivan to round out the 4. My starting round 1 interchange bench is Will Phillips, Robert Hansen Jr., Darcy Tucker, and Luke McDonald. Now, when it comes to Darcy Tucker, I kind of always thought he would play round 1, although I personally didn't have him in my best 23 at the start of the year. I always thought there was probably a chance that he would play round 1. I think he was really, really solid last year. I've said so many times before that Darcy Tucker is definitely the workhorse kind of guy, and he allows the LDUs and the Sheezels to do the flashy things as they need. I don't know if long term, and by long term I mean by season's end, both McDonald and Tucker will be in the same side. I did say in my review of the West Coast game that I think both of them do have the same deficiencies, and they probably are not really helping the side with their skill, but I do think that their defensive pressure, their defensive efforts, and their ability to get the ball out of sticky situations from some time and another is really, really important. So I do think that both Tucker and McDonald have done enough to at least start in this side in round one. How long they stay there for, I'm not sure. From a leadership perspective, I still think that Luke McDonald is important. I still think both of them do add good things to this side, and I think both of them should start. I also don't really have any indication as to why they wouldn't start in round one. Like I said, Riley Hardiman didn't play in Perth despite the fact that he made the trip over. He actually didn't play at all in that game against West Coast. I didn't think that Miller Bergman was overly impressive when he did come on towards the end of the game. Otherwise, the backline has pretty much stayed the same, and I do think that it is important for a backline that lacked so much continuity last season. It's important for us to find that this season and actually give our backline a chance to gel and work as a unit. We had like 20 odd players rotating through our backline last year, and it's just no way that a backline can succeed when you have that much disruption throughout the year. So I think Tucker and McDonald should still play. I think they are at this stage important parts of the defense. I know that a lot of people will disagree with me, but that is my reasoning as to why I'd keep them in there. A, I just don't have a reason to not put them in there. And B, I think the more that this backline can gel as a unit, the better. Finn O'Sullivan is a new face in there. Caleb Daniel is a new face in there. So I just think it's enough change for now. I would like to keep the rest somewhat similar and then make changes as needed as we start to gel and as we start to improve as a unit. I definitely would have Will Phillips in there. He's been one of my standouts over the preseason so far. He really looks like a man on a mission. He looks like this is his year for a redemption story, and I think he has absolutely earned the right to start in this side in round one. I think we've got to just give him a go, especially in the absence of George Wardlaw. I think it's really important to give him the chance. I think it's reward for effort. I think he's really, really shown enough to me that suggests that he should be playing round one. I don't, again, have a reason why we shouldn't put him in there. And then I've gone for Robin Hansen Jr. I think he's been a real surprise packet for me. I don't know if I expected him to come on the way that he has. He did finish off last year really, really well, and he's clearly just improved and gone from strength to strength as the preseason has gone on. He's shown a lot of excitement and promise over the preseason matches. I don't know if he's shown enough for me just yet, but maybe part of that is working with Konstanty to try and find a spot. He has been the more attacking of the pair. He's pushed up the ground, but he does look exciting. He has had little moments, little flash in the pan moments. So I'd love to see what he can do given the opportunity. On the other side of that is obviously George Wardlaw, sidelined with a hamstring injury. Won't see him for the first few rounds of the season at least. Brent Teakle is a really interesting one because I went into this preseason thinking he showed quite a lot of promise in the back half of season 2024, and I thought if he could take the opportunity with both hands, get another preseason under his belt, he could just be anything for North this year. But Jack Darling has thrown a spanner in the works for Bryn Teakle. Not only has he been an incredible addition to our forward line, it just is functioning so much better with him being there, but he also is durable and he is able to pinch hit in the ruck for Xerri. Xerri also looks like his tank's improved, so he can ruck majority of the game on his own. So that being said, we don't need to play Bryn Teakle, and it allows us a lot more flexibility and allows us to rotate lots of different players through the forward and the midfield, and maybe allows us for a bit more run and carry as we probably require. So while I understand the opportunity was there for Bryn Teakle, we've gone in a different direction, and I actually really back the direction that we're going with at the moment. I think it really contributes to the game style that we're trying to play, a little bit more attacking and fast moving by hand. So that is a move that I have made to mirror what we have seen in the preseason to this point. Riley Hardiman, and I have said many times, I am really bullish on Riley Hardiman and what he can do and being that attacking, rebounding defender as we need. But Finn O'Sullivan looked awesome off that half back line in the second half of the game against West Coast last week. And until there is a point where he can move higher up the ground and into the midfield, then maybe Riley Hardiman still will spend some time in the twos, continuing to hone his craft. Hopefully we'll see him at some point this year. Hopefully he does get his chance, but I just can't see him getting into this round one side at this stage. Injury has forced a change to my substitute as well. Zach Fisher is currently sidelined with an injury and is not available for selection. So I've gone with a few options here. I've gone Jacob Konstanty, Dylan Stevens and Eddie Ford. Both Konstanty and Stevens I think have shown a few really, really nice things over the pre-season. I really, really like what Jacob Konstanty's had to to offer. He actually has surprised me quite a bit. I was unsure about what he would add to this side coming in. I didn't really know where he would fit or how, but I've really, really liked what I've seen from him defensively. He had a bit of a quieter game against West Coast. He was quite impressive in that initial scratch match against the D's. I have gone for Hansen Jr. over Konstanty at this point to start in the best 22 and start on field from the start of the game. I just think I'm leaning towards him at the moment simply because he's shown a little bit more for me, but I would still like to see Konstanty get a run at it. If not as the sub, then at some point come into the side this year. I think he would definitely be worth trying and giving him sort of a block of like 4 to 5 games, letting him get comfortable, growing confidence and see what he can do. Didn't mind the game from Dylan Stephens last week against West Coast either. I admittedly have not been crash hot on Dylan Stephens. I said this in my review of the game after we played West Coast, but hand on heart, he was great. I thought he added some really, really nice things in that West Coast game. Could see him as an option as sub. Eddie Ford, I think, is a really, really tricky one. I think he has played really, really well. He played well in that practice match against Melbourne. He also played really well reportedly on the weekend in the VFL. It's tough with him because the likes of a Zurhaar or a Curtis are probably leaving him out. And unfortunately for Eddie, Zurhaar's ceiling maybe is higher, but we don't see it enough from him, whereas Eddie Ford is a fighter and week in, week out, you know what you're going to get from him is super, super consistent. Eddie doesn't maybe have, I think he's got creativity and I think he has flair, but maybe not that superstar X factor sort of thing you might be looking for as you would find in a Curtis or a Zurhaar. Zurhaar also signed the big 5-year deal at the end of last year, and that to me is why Eddie only got the 1 year. I think they're probably waiting to see what Bull would do before we offered a contract to Eddie. I would love to give him a run. I think he definitely deserves to play. I think he's shown enough to me anyway that suggests that he should play. So I put him in there as an option for a sub, but he didn't play in Perth last week. He didn't even make the trip over. So I'm not too sure where the club will land on that. So I've just given you a few options for potential substitute selections for next Saturday's game. So there you have it, guys. That is my team to start round 1 against the Bulldogs. Let me know what you think of my team. What would you do differently? Leave all of your thoughts in the comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. You guys give me some epic suggestions and always make me think outside the box. So the best part is hearing from you guys. Let's chat all week. It's game week. It's officially here. Season 2025 is a go over on socials. Kanga TV show on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Thank you guys for interacting with me on Facebook. I promise you I'm trying to do better. I'm not really doing a good job of it, but I'm going to lift. I promise. You guys have to make sure I lift, hold me accountable to that. If you have anything else you want to chat about, feel free to send me an email. If there's anything longer, anything more you want to discuss, kangatvshow@gmail.com. We have got so much content coming this week. It's all about the Bulldogs in round 1. I cannot wait. Season 2025. This is what we've been building for. This is what Kanga TV has been building for over the last 6 months. We've gone through the trade and the draft and everything in between, and it's finally here. Everything has come to this moment, and I can't wait to share it all with you guys on YouTube, over on socials, also at the game. I can't wait to meet all of you hopefully next Saturday night. We've got a lot to get through until then. I'm looking forward to the week, I'm sure, as much as you guys are. See you then.